The following is a local resident producers program. The program content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of CATV2, Oshkosh Community Access Television, the City of Oshkosh, the Oshkosh Cable Television Advisory Commission, or Time Warner Cable.
Hi everyone, welcome to another edition of Eye on Oshkosh. I'm Cheryl Hentz along with my co-host Tony Palmeri. On this edition we're very pleased to welcome Winnebago County Executive Mark Harris. Mark of course has been here in the past as a member of the Oshkosh Common Council. This is his first time here as our new county executive, so welcome.
Thank you.
And congratulations on your new post. Although now it's like 4 months old, so
that's
5
right.
months old, whatever, but it's the first time you've been here since being elected. Of course, the main thing that we wanted to chat with you about tonight, Mark, was the sales tax that you're proposing. For anyone who hasn't been reading the paper, monitoring the websites, listening to the radio, you must have your head under a rock somewhere. What is being proposed is a 0.5% sales tax in Winnebago County that would be in addition to the 5% state sales tax that we're currently being charged. And Mark has been gracious enough to come here this evening and talk about why he feels this is a necessary evil for Winnebago County. So thanks again for being here, and let's just jump right off the diving board here. You're proposing this tax, why?
Basically, I was preparing a budget last June, and you start very early on the next year's budget. And at that time, we thought we were going to get about 6% growth in the property tax base for the county, about half of it from appreciation of existing property and half of it from new construction. And those estimates came out pretty close, not exact, but pretty close. But what people have to realize is that a 6% increase in the property tax base would generate about 2.2% additional funds to be spent by the county, because the tax levy is only about 1/3 of the county's revenue. Actually, the largest portion of the county's revenue comes from what they call intergovernmental transfers, money transferred to us from the state and the federal government. And those monies have not been growing at the same rate as costs have grown, and probably will be roughly flat for next year. We're seeing some of those transfers cut quite a bit. We're going to lose $600,000 in Medicaid reimbursement for the nursing home. We're going to lose over $100,000 in transportation aids. We're going to lose $160,000 of federal money for the MEG unit, which is a drug prevention unit the sheriff participates in. We knew we were going to have to do a tough budget, and what I was proposing was a budget that would increase county spending by about 2%. And that's no small feat when you see the increase in the cost of gasoline, double-digit increases in the price of electricity, and some very generous labor contracts. I inherited a 3-year labor agreement from my predecessor that has wages going up for the represented employees quite a bit. So, working on this budget, it became apparent that it was going to be a very tight budget, that some layoffs would be involved, and that most categories of spending would have to be cut to offset those expenses that were increasing. And then it became apparent that the governor, who, at least by me, was expected to veto the levy limitations proposed by the Assembly, was going to modify them, make them a little gentler, but was going to let them through. And right away I knew that that was going to take away that increased tax revenue from the appreciation of real property. So that right there, that took away about $1.7 million from us. And it also eliminated our ability to raise the property tax rates. And in fact, what many legislatures don't seem to realize is it forces us to lower our property tax rate to offset any appreciation of real property. So what that would leave us with is about $1,500,000 in increased revenue from the new construction that occurred in the county. and that's about 1% of our total budget. But I also inherited a structural deficit of $1.5 million. And I pledged to create a balanced budget, one that didn't draw down the general fund any further. And in order to do that, I need nearly all of that money that comes in from new construction just to balance the budget without drawing down reserves. Only leaves me about $100,000 for increased wages and all those other expenses that are going up. We also had some issues. We had some under-budgeted payroll from last year.
The Sheriff's Department you're talking about?
Yeah, the Sheriff's Department is most of that, yes. And it's just, kind of the perfect financial storm for the county.
What we're going to get into all the specifics of this, but you mentioned the the shortage in the Sheriff's Department budget for his staff. Do you know? Do you have an opinion, Mark, as to what that figure will be? Because when Sheriff Brooks was here a few weeks back, he said that, he admitted that he's the one who had put out there the $818,000 figure to the media, but that when but he said that is as high as it would ever go. But in reality, when he really started looking at it, it was going to be more in the like $100,000 range or thereabouts.
Yeah, I think that's some confusion and interpretation of what he was saying. The positions that were left out of the budget, we don't know the exact number perhaps, but between benefits and wages was probably around $818,000. What he's telling you is that he was leaving some positions open and making other spending cuts so that when he has to go to the Personnel and Finance Committee and make a request for a transfer to cover the shortfall, he thinks he can whittle that shortfall down to a much smaller amount. But from the perspective of its impact on my budget, I've now got my property tax levy frozen at a level that didn't include the pay for 17 positions which were never intended to be left vacant, and most of which were filled at some point in time from the time of the prior year's budget.
So you're saying it still is in the $800,000 figure, but he's going to whittle it down elsewhere? Well,
it depends on, of the savings he's made, which ones are permanent savings. If he eliminates a position to bring it down, that will save me the year he eliminates it in subsequent years. But if he leaves a position vacant for 6 months, then fills it, that'll bring down the amount he needs in the year of the transfer.
Okay.
So it still leaves me with $800,000 that wasn't in the levy level when it was frozen.
Okay, gotcha.
So it's got to be addressed somehow.
Tony,
Mark, is this a year for a sales tax increase? I was just looking at some figures from the paper. We've had a 35% increase in fuel prices for people. Average Oshkosh resident is going to pay another $165 a year in city property taxes. Wisconsin Public Service is going up 11% for people. Average annual energy bill for an Oshkosh home is going to be over $1,700. $180 increase in energy bill possible, and the water rate is going up. You take all that, and can you really say this is only a 0.5%?
Well, and you've left out probably people will see rising interest rates on their home equity loans.
Sure.
There's a million reasons why this is a terrible year to try and put through a sales tax. It's going to be terribly unpopular. But I'm down to two choices. I can institute a property tax. Of course, the sales tax, but the sales tax will generate a lot more money than what I need to make this budget work. Most of the money would be used for property tax relief. And in fact, the resolution I'm sending to P&F includes a 40-cent equalized property tax decrease the first year as part of the sales tax proposal. And that would be bringing the rate down from $567 down to $527.
Which you have to do, right? I mean,
Well,
a
actually,
county cannot institute this 0.5% sales tax without it being geared toward property tax reduction. Is that right?
Well, actually, there's a 1998 Attorney General's opinion that allows you to use the sales tax for anything that property tax would otherwise have been used for.
But the original spirit of it was the property tax reduction.
The intent is for property tax reduction, and that's why I'm proposing this 40 cents drop from $567 to $527 the first year. And that's because we only get 9 months of the sales tax the first year, and the state warns you that there may be a lag or some sort of under collection on the first year. I don't fully understand why. Okay. There'd be an additional 30-cent drop in the tax rate, which would take it to $497 the second year when we get a full year of sales tax. So that really would be a 12% drop in their property tax. So those people that are, and you're right, people are pressed by all those things. But those people, you know, especially the people that talk about being worried that they're going to lose their home to property taxes, or that they just don't have any disposable income, most of those people are not spending a lot of money on items subject to sales tax. It's probably less than 40% of their disposable income, because remember, medicine and food is excluded.
Well, the Department of Revenue in Madison last year did a tax incidence study. For the first time in about 15 years they did it. And they found that the sales tax is regressive across all household groups. The study found that the poorest 1/5 of households paid nearly 4% of their income in sales taxes, compared with less than 2% for the top 1% of households. So you're instituting a regressive tax with a sales tax.
It's regressive, but as the Wisconsin County Association says, it is one of the more regressive taxes, but less regressive than the property tax. So by giving that household...
I don't know if they say that.
Well, that's what I've read. And by giving, you know, take the example of a household where you have two people receiving Social Security benefits, perhaps a very small pension, but they might still be in a $100,000 home, a home that they bought when they were working. What I'm proposing, the first year they would get a $40 decrease in their property taxes. That would cover the first $8,000 of spending subject to sales tax. If their income is down in that $20,000 range, they'll likely actually save money. Now, the second year, they'll have a full year of sales tax, so their sales tax goes up. But they'll get the additional $30 of property tax savings. When we do that calculation for that type of couple, they actually will receive more of a decrease in their property tax than they pay in sales tax. But contrast that with a two-income couple that has a lot of disposable income. They're probably going to see, you know, depending on what their income level is, maybe they're going to pay $50 or $60 more in tax. But that will cause the tax to hit those people who have disposable income to spend on things other than food and medicine.
Right. Mark, didn't you get yourself into this position, though, because of the campaign that you ran against Jane Vandehei, where you criticized her constantly for going to the reserves?
Yes,
right?
And I think that's absolutely essential.
Right. But that is an option for you. You could go to the reserves if you wanted to.
No, I don't think we could. We're probably already going to have to do a song and dance for the bond rating people, because the reserves have gotten so low. And I've got a little chart.
Well, what I'm saying is, you literally could go to the reserves. It might not be good for the bond rating, but you could do it.
Not for very long, because we're at such a low point in the reserves.
But my point is, in my opinion, the time to go to the reserves is when the state government are doing these horrible things that they're doing to us. That's the time.
It's a rainy day fund. This is monsoon season.
Right.
It seems.
Exactly. My fear is that, Mark, what you're saying to the state government is, beat us up as much as you want, and we will just go and find revenue wherever we can. We'll be forced into a sales tax increase because of what you guys are doing. Why not just say to the state government, you're putting us in a position of depleting our general fund, our reserve fund. Wouldn't that be more effective with the state?
I've got to propose a balanced budget, and our reserves are at the point where they can't be taken down any lower. This is what they've done.
Here, why don't we'll try and zoom in on this. I'll hold.
Show this one.
There we go. If you want to just pull it back a little and.
Okay.
There, Mary Helen can zoom in on that.
What I'm trying to show here, the red columns are showing the dollar values of the reserves over the years. Right. And you don't see as dramatic a decrease in the dollar value, but all that time, the county spending was gradually creeping up. So the blue line is plotting the reserves as a percentage of county spending. We're down just a little over 4% of our annual spending on reserves. That's a dangerously low level, and one that could cause bondholders to lose confidence. And the end result of that is that the county is going to have to pay a lot more interest on their indebtedness, and that's going to drive up your costs too. So I think we've gotten as low on this area as we dare. I think it would actually cost the taxpayers more if we continue to dip into that. The other thing is, if you continue to dip in that, then you're not addressing the difference between your revenues and your spending. You're deferring that decision and putting that on some future taxpayer.
My own personal opinion is, if the state government can see that counties across the state are endangering their bond rating, are coming dangerously close to the things you're describing, maybe they will change their behavior in Madison.
You give the
But
legislature far too much credit.
The more the city councils and the county executives and the county administrators keep saying to Madison, do whatever you want to do to us, and we will keep finding a way to raise more money, they're just going to keep up that behavior down there. That's the way I see it. Cheryl.
Yeah. Mark, how, in your opinion, how did we get in this predicament? Is it because the legislators in Madison simply don't have any kind of decent fiscal and budgetary responsibility? Is it something that Jane Vandehei did? Is it a combination of both? What's the reason for this predicament that we're in?
Jane's heart was always in the right place, and I think she wanted to do a good job, but numbers were not one of her strengths, and she was willing to draw down the reserves, and I think she didn't realize how quickly those reserves would come down, because in some years when they budgeted to take money from the reserves, when the budgets were loose, generally there was a surplus in each department that would flow down to the general fund that would offset that. But in recent years, as the budgets got a little tighter, people budgeted very closely to what they thought their expenses would be, and when she budgeted drawing money out of the reserves in fact came down by that amount. And that's what we experienced in the last year. The reserves came down 1.8 million.
But yet, and we can have her on to talk about her own record.
Sure.
But yet, when she left that office, the bond rating was as high when she left as when she came in.
Yeah, but contrast that with the city. During the time I was with the city, the bond rating went up twice.
But still was less than the counties.
That's right. But it was moving up from a very low level to her level. Hers hung on, but unfortunately, those bond ratings are done based on a prior audited years. We don't know what the final impact is going to be of her last budget year when it's finally looked at. I'm hoping that the bond rating stays the same. But if I don't have a plan that avoids drawing down further reserves, I can almost assure you that the bond rating will
All right, what do you say to David Albrecht? Now, David Albrecht is the chair of the county board. Good guy. We had him on the show.
This guy.
He was asked about the sales tax, and he said, I look at it, he said it's an easy cop-out. It just seems to me that we looked at sales tax before we looked into other things.
I think Dave jumped to that conclusion because of the time that I announced. I actually went to the papers and laid out for them what I thought were the two choices we had. And I think it caught him off guard. He wasn't prepared for it. But we really only have two choices. We either have to implement the sales tax, use most of it for property tax relief, and use part of it to have a rational budget, one that would increase spending by 2%. Or we have to lay off people and terminate services to get it down to a 0% budget. And the difference is laying off about 100 people, and it will dramatically impact the sheriff's office, Parkview, human services. It'll affect the accounting areas, the clerk of the courts. They're all going to be losing people if we don't have this sales
And this is
tax.
all because of the levy limit that's been set.
Yeah, if people, I wish the legislators understood what they did, because the ones I talked to did not realize what they had done. They thought they had frozen the tax rate. What they did is much bigger than that.
They froze the levy.
That's right.
Okay, but
they've been talking about this, I'm sorry to interrupt, but they've been talking about this for a long time. And yet, when Paul Esslinger, when you were on the city council, and Paul asked for the rest of the council support to bring these folks forward, officials like Greg Underheim, Carol Ressler, he couldn't get the support from people, including yourself, Mark. I mean, why would you not have said, that's a damn good idea, Paul. Let's get them in here because they're putting us in a hell of a position. You didn't do that.
You're talking way back during the revenue sharing cuts.
Last year.
Yeah,
but
because
we all knew these things were.
Because I was meeting directly with Greg already. I've had several meetings with Greg when I was mayor, when I was on the council, and I've met with him since I've been county executive.
But don't you think that, and I realize this is kind of hindsight here, but don't you think that it's all of our tax dollars, it's all of our wallets. Don't you think that instead of having more behind-the-scenes meetings, this should have been done in the public, where the public has a right to see what's going on with our dollars?
Well, the difference is when these are your legislators, you want them helping you to avoid these situations.
He didn't help much.
But oh no, I don't think he did either. But embarrassing them in public is not the way to get them to help you out.
I don't know that Paul's intent was ever to embarrass anyone, but I do think it's important that, and certainly when Greg did finally come forward, I don't think he was embarrassed by anyone. He's made to answer questions that he's being paid to answer. He's being asked to be accountable.
That's true.
You mentioned that you went to the newspaper and they wrote an editorial, and I just want to read this portion of the editorial. It says, "We can't talk about a sales tax in Winnebago County when county government hasn't done enough to identify cuts, sought increased productivity and increased efficiency. Winnebago County shouldn't enact a sales tax because it can. Mark Harris has not made the case that the county is in dire straits."
Yeah, I wish they and I wish Dave would have asked me what cuts I was making. I've cut out the pay for performance for the non-represented employees. Mind you, I'm on a 3-year contract. I can't do anything with regard to the represented employees until the next union negotiations.
Right.
But I've cut basically 1.5% out of the 4.5% pay that the non-represented employees would have. I've frozen the sick pay payout benefit.
Yeah,
We're at retirement.
we'll
They were
get to
getting
that.
65% of sick days accumulated. I'm freezing the number of those days as of the end of this year, and I'm also freezing the salaries that those days are computed on as of the end of this year. I'm proposing all kinds of cuts throughout the budget in terms of, you know, for us, most of the budget really is people, although we're talking about cutting road materials.
Right.
We're talking about turning on the thermostats. I don't think we're leaving anything out of consideration.
No stone unturned.
No stone unturned. I've had started budget meetings in June where we talked to all the departments and set goals. We've had subsequent meetings with the department heads to talk to them about why they weren't meeting the goals. You know, a lot of them were saying they couldn't meet those initial goals, which was the 2% growth. We got them to commit to writing what they would do if they have to cut back to the 0% goals. You know, it's been a long, detailed process, and I think people that weren't involved in the process or didn't know about it, if they didn't ask me, they assumed I just jumped to the conclusion of the sales tax. But it was just the opposite. It's because I'd spent so much time on the budget already. I knew exactly what the levy limitation meant. It meant I was going to be $3 million short of the budget that we were having difficulty meeting.
Right. So you say the only choices are to raise the sales tax or have massive layoffs.
Yes,
right?
and there's going to be layoffs either way. I anticipate 30 to 40 layoffs even with the sales tax.
Okay, but they're really, I'm not saying any other choices are good choices. You know, we talked about going to the reserves. You've talked about why you think that's a terrible idea. The state also allows the counties to exceed their levy limit if they go to referendum.
That's right.
So that is a choice. May not be a good one, but if we did that and the voters passed it, we wouldn't be looking at any layoffs, right?
You mean if they passed allowing us to raise the tax rate? Because
sure. Why not go to the voters, Mark? Why not just say to them, look,
well,
say this is what we need in order to maintain the current level of staffing and services that we have. And when the voters say no, then at that point, we make our layoffs.
What handicap it for me? What chance do you think voters would say tax me more?
I think
in that fashion.
Well, is it better to have the county board just tax them without any input?
I think the county board is to provide leadership, and I think that's the correct starting point for me. Let the county board determine whether they want the sales tax and the property tax relief, or they want the layoffs. And I will do my best to make the budget work either way. But I have to tell you that, looking close at it, the loss of service to the most vulnerable components of our society is going to be huge, because that's the services the county provides. It's the nursing home, it's the human service area, it's the sheriff's department, the veterans department. You know, we're the ones that help the veterans obtain the benefits they're entitled to. Most don't receive everything they could because they don't have the ability to get it themselves.
So if some supervisors came out and said, you know what, maybe we should go to referendum to see if people want to exceed the levy, you wouldn't really have a say in that as county executive, right? That's the board could do that.
That's right.
But
they
you would urge
have the
them
final
not,
say.
Right, but you would urge them not to do that.
I would urge them to show the leadership and pick the sales tax. I suspect if they're going to vote against the sales tax, and I expect it to be a very close vote.
How much do you need? Do you need 2/3 or just a simple majority?
I need a simple majority.
All right. Okay.
But I expect it to be a very close vote. If they turn it down, I really think then it's my job to go ahead with a budget that does not have a sales tax in it, that freezes our levy and gives me $100,000 of additional money from last year to cover all those expenses. And I just have to pare expenses down to get there. And it doesn't mean loss just of people, but it means the loss of services.
Right, but it looks like Outagamie County and Fond du Lac County don't have any interest in raising that sales tax. That's what it looks like right now, even though Toby Paltzer in the past has spoken favorably about it.
But Toby's already been to his board with a sales tax proposal in prior years and lost.
He's lost. But if Outagamie doesn't do it and Fond du Lac doesn't do it, you really think that you can get 19 votes or whatever you need, 20 votes out of our board?
Well, you know, the other 3 counties that border our county already have the sales tax, and the majority of counties do. And in fact, nearly all those counties indicate that they get no complaints about having the sales tax, that people prefer that as a means of taxation than the property tax, because property tax burden falls unevenly on society. It misses certain segments, and it also misses the tourism and the day visitors, which are actually pretty substantial here.
But at least for people who itemize their taxes, they can write off their property taxes on their federal taxes.
Yeah, but remember,
the sales tax is just
right.
wasted tax, really.
That's a good point, and that's another reason the Assembly's made a huge error here, because every community is going to be grabbing for revenue in means other than property tax.
Yes.
Because remember, they've taken that choice off the table. It isn't a choice between property tax and sales tax. They've frozen the property tax in a fashion that is not an option realistically.
Right.
Mark, are these numbers accurate? I'm getting this from the August 4th edition of the Oshkosh Northwestern, and they claim that the sales tax would generate roughly $9 million in 2006, and of that, they're saying that $3 million of that you would use to plug budget holes, $1 million would be on standby, and then the other remaining roughly $5 million would be to reduce property taxes. Are those correct numbers? Or
when we've checked with the state, they've advised caution on estimating those numbers. But yeah, that's roughly correct. We can't, the way we're coming up with $9 million is that the estimate for a full year sales tax is 12.
Okay.
But I'm not so sure that the economy is going to continue as healthy as it has been.
Well,
So the number might come in lower. And the state indicates that sometimes there's a delay in collection the first year. I don't fully understand that, but they say not to count on the full amount that you would otherwise expect. So we have to be a little conservative the first year. That's why I'm suggesting 40 cents of property tax relief the first year. When I have 9 months, when I get just 3 more months, which are not necessarily the best sales months, the beginning of the year and the next year, I think I can get an additional 30%, 30 cents, but a lot of that comes from the fact that you can expect good collections by the time you get into your second year.
okay. And you're talking 40 cents per $1,000 of assessed valuation.
Well, per equalized, it's a little bit different,
Okay.
and you know, that's where some of the complexity comes in. I know Oshkosh had a reassessment, and
I'm very familiar with it.
sure, that's dramatically reallocating the tax load within Oshkosh on these assessed values. The way the county works is something called equalized value, and those represent market values that the state gives us.
Okay.
We allocate the tax burden to all the communities in the county based on their equalized values. So we're already allocating it between communities on fair market value, so that your reassessment has no impact on that allocation to Oshkosh. But it's still complex because then Oshkosh breaks down the county property tax burden that we assign to them to their residents and property owners based on their assessed values.
So we're kind of getting it from the city because they're using their assessed values. You guys are using actual values, and it looks like the property owner is taking it in the shorts from both sides.
Well, there's 2 ways to look at it. Clearly, if your property has gone up by a great deal more than the average increase in assessment, you're going to take a larger share of your community's tax burden. So there's a shift of taxes to you and away from properties that were underassessed. You can look at that as being, you know, an unfair thing, and I understand people don't want to pay more. But there's another way of looking at it. When you do a reassessment, you know, we're all agreeing that these taxes should be based on the market value of the property. As time goes by, different properties are changing at different rates. So the accuracy of those allocations is poorer and poorer as time goes by. This actually is correcting it. You could look at it as a way that someone else was carrying a share of your burden if your property's been moved up greatly, and now you're going to be carrying your fair share until it changes again. The problem is that throughout Wisconsin, throughout the country, single-family homes have been appreciating faster than commercial property. And that's causing a shift of taxes away from commercial property on the private homeowner, and as a private homeowner, we just don't like it very much.
I just had one other question concerning these numbers, because I truly don't understand the $1 million or thereabouts on standby. If there's going to be, and help me understand this, if there's going to be $1 million approximately on standby, I guess, number one, what does standby mean? And if it's money that's not being, you know, allocated anywhere, why would we need any county employee layoffs?
Yeah. The state's telling me that I can't count on, the estimates are for $12 million for a full year. So 9 months, you might guess $9 million. The state is telling me don't rely on that, only count on a lesser amount, perhaps 7 or 8 million. Okay. So if I really am only going to receive $8 million, I better only use $8 million. So what I'm saying is I believe I'm going to get 9, but in case it's just 8, between property tax relief and budgeting money, I'm only going to use part of that.
Okay.
If I'm right and I get the higher amount, that'll boost the general fund and will also put me in a position to allocate the next year's full year sales tax revenue more aggressively. So
we may not see any layoffs if a sales tax is instituted?
No, because I'm trying to stick to a really tight budget of only 2% of spending, and because the labor contracts were really high. And you know, the loss of this intergovernmental money, the under budgeting problem from the sheriff's office. When you combine all these things, for me to come out at 2%, I'm still going to end up laying 30 to 40 people off.
Mark,
but it'd be 100 people more, perhaps, without the sales tax.
Mark, if we took a walk down Main Street in Oshkosh or downtown Neenah, Menasha, I'm sure you would agree with me that probably 90% of the small business owners would be opposed to increasing the sales tax. So what is your appeal to them? How would you persuade these small business owners that this tax needs to be raised?
I think the community operates better when you have efficient county services, and our services are very important. I think if you lose these services, it's going to impact their customers. But I also think the county employees are their customers as well. And I don't know that the state legislature has even thought about this, but I'm going to guess that statewide at least 5,000 people are going to be laid off from local government units in the state. And if they're specialized employees, people like patrol officers or social workers, they're not going to stay in Wisconsin because every Wisconsin unit of government is going to be laying off at the same time. So they're talking about losing the business of at least 100 additional people and their families. Also, you know, we have a strong sense of community here. We haven't, you know, gotten down to every man for himself yet. Although obviously the New Orleans examples is showing us it doesn't take much to push some people over the edge. I think they want us to be a healthy and well-functioning system. I think they want the sheriff's office to work. They want the court system to work. I can trim some people, but let me do it through a series of tight, tough budgets instead of taking a meat cleaver to my employees and lopping off large numbers of people that are doing work that we know we need. I think the community is going to be better off in the long run if we do this in an intelligent, careful way, rather than this smashing way that the legislature has proposed and that the governor has not vetoed.
Now, have you instructed people who work for the county, if they're asked about the sales tax, to provide nightmare scenarios
Not
for
at
citizens?
all. And in fact, I've gone round and round with some of the departments where, you know, I ask them, okay, what do you have to do to get down to the 2% budget I'm proposing? And you know, they've told me some of the unpopular decisions they would make. And then I say, well, what would you do to get down to the 0? And it's, oh, this would be just off. It'll be impossible. I say, tell me what you would really do, not the worst case scenario. Tell me what you're really going to do, because I'm going to tell the board before the fact what you would do. And there's a good chance they're going to turn this down.
All right.
And we better do that. And I'll tell you, it's actually hard to extract that information from people.
Reason why I bring this up, Mark, is because one of the supervisors forwarded me an email from Mr. Ornstein, who's the budget director.
Yes, he's I call him my finance director.
Finance director, Chuck Ornstein. And this supervisor had asked Ornstein for some information about jail costs and so on and so forth. And I thought part of Chuck's response was fascinating. He says, My staff and I are stretched pretty thin, especially at this time of the year when we are trying to get the budget together. But then this is the killer here. It is quite likely that if the sales tax does not pass, I will be forced to lay off someone in my department. If that happens, it will be very difficult, if at all possible, to get answers to questions like this, whether from you or from the public. Our accuracy may decline because we won't have the time to check each other's work. Then he says, I don't say this to be nasty or threatening. I'm only telling you the reality of the situation we are all being placed in.
Chuck's proposing that all of his people take 2 weeks unpaid vacation in order to meet his budget target. So you take a small department of about 6 people and you have everybody out of the office 2 additional weeks.
So you would agree with him, if we don't raise the sales tax, there's a possibility of less accuracy coming out of the budget department?
I don't think it was a good idea for him to send that in an email, but quite honestly, most of our departments are small enough that you lay off 1 or 2 people from these small departments and they're going to have to stop something that they do. I know people like to think that layoffs and the work they do aren't related, but they genuinely are, and every department that loses people is going to have to do something different or do less of something. In the human service area, for instance, they may have to eliminate the equivalent of 14 positions. Now, they may try and do that by shortening everybody's work week, but the impact on responding to a child abuse call, trying to assist an elderly person to stay in their home and stay out of a nursing home, you know, it's the same whether you're using these unpaid vacations or laying people off. If you have less people, you can't possibly do it as fast and as efficiently.
Well, I appreciate that, and certainly that makes sense. But don't you think that that's kind of using scare tactics also?
No, not at all.
I mean, it may be reality.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think losing an accountant is the type of thing that's going to scare people. What should scare people is that the bulk of our people are in just 3 areas. Parkview, which is the nursing home for the mentally ill elderly, basically people who are on Medicaid that can't get into other nursing homes, people that have escape risk tendencies from nursing homes, people with acute medical needs so that the other nursing homes won't treat them. If I lose a lot of people from there, that's going to impact the care on them.
Sure.
The social
Society
service
is most
area,
vulnerable.
That's right.
The elderly, the children, the poor.
But take the sheriff's office. You know, a lot of the things they do are things aimed at cutting back on recidivism, dealing with crime early. A lot of those things are going to have to go. And everybody, when you tell them what you're going to have to cut, everybody says cut somewhere else. But you know what? Everything we would cut at this point is important to somebody. I know one department head said, just close the park. Just close the county park, because that's not as essential as what you'd be cutting from my department. And another one says, just get rid of the nursing home, because why should we be in that business anyways? And all indications are that the burden is going to get greater and greater. You know, but every one of those things is terribly important, and sometimes even life and death for somebody.
Well, of course, you know, and I guess if I had to take a choice or make a choice, I would say get rid of the parks. It's not that I'm opposed to parks, it's that we're talking about core essential services versus, you know, some of the other things. And if we got rid of the county park, it would be a terrible thing because it's a beautiful park. And there are a lot of features to it that are enjoyable and serve quality of life issues. But we have a lot of other parks in the city. You know, we got some questions from a viewer by email, and I just wanted to throw these out here real quick. 2 of them I'm going to lump together here, and then I can talk about the other 2. Do you feel you would have been elected if you ran on the sales tax idea? And if so, is that why you didn't propose it as a candidate?
Well, I had no intention of using the sales tax. I don't like the idea of the sales tax. But when I give an honest evaluation of all these layoffs or the sales tax, I know the sales tax is a politically unpopular one. I know this is costing me votes. But when I think about it, the responsible thing for me to do is to push for this sales tax, give it my best, because that's going to be the better way to go for both the community, for the employees, for everyone. But if it doesn't pass and I've done my best, then I'll go the other route and do what's necessary and make it work as best I can. I won't let the snow removal suffer. I'll try and keep the other services intact as much as I can, but I would be lying if I told you that things are going to be intact. They're not going to be. And there's going to be a lot of stupid decisions. Decisions like deferring road maintenance to save money, that is going to cost us more in the long run. Deferring maintenance on our buildings that will cost us money in the long run.
We're seeing that in the city.
You know, eliminating teen court, doing a lot of programs that probably in the long run help us keep people out of prison.
Sure.
You know, all those things will end up being considered because there's no easy choices left. We're talking cutting $3 million out of a budget plan that only allows for a 2% increase when all my expenses are going up much more than that.
One of the other questions, and I think you've already addressed this, but this writer says, what cost-saving measures have you offered? Why don't you just give us a list real quickly of the things that you've done? You already did that at the outset.
Sure.
But
30 to 40 layoffs, which I don't like to lay off anybody. Eliminating the accrual of additional sick days for retirement payout. Cutting the non-represented employees' wage increase by 1/3. We are talking to the unions. I don't know if we're going to get the results I want, but there is at least discussions going on that they may in fact make some concessions contingent on passage of the sales tax. And we priced out the items that were discussed initially, and it would be about $500,000. If they can give me that, I think anyone would be foolish not to go along with the sales tax. But I honestly don't know that I'll get that because remember, we're between contract dates. They're under no compulsion to deal. But I think this vote on the sales tax is going to be so close that without those union concessions, I really don't think I'll win it.
And then their other question is, why are there only 2 options to solve the problems? And I guess the 2 options they mean are go with the sales tax and only have 30 to 40 layoffs, or don't have the sales tax and lay off 130 or so.
It's because we're a service organization and an overwhelming majority of our costs are in labor, either internal or contracted labor. So there really isn't large amounts anywhere else to cut. I mean, there's some things we can do, and we're doing some of that. I mean, we're going to be cutting down on supplies. We're trying to eliminate we're eliminating all the out-of-state travel. We're trying to cut down on any in-state travel and training. But there's a long-term cost to eliminating training as well. Education's important. But we're attacking everything. We're at the point where we go line by line and say, can you cut another $50 from your phone bill? You know, and budgets already were pretty tight at the county. I've got $50 for supplies in the county executive budget. I don't have any money for travel, and I travel a lot to Madison, up to Neenah. I pay for that myself. In truth, I buy most of the business supplies for myself. We belong to some organizations. No money in my budget to pay the dues. We've been stiffing the organizations that we belong to on the dues. I've paid those out of my own pocket. My assistant buys all the coffee for our office. You can go through every department, and there's people, especially the heads of those departments, incurring expenses, kind of like teachers buying their own supplies.
Oh, yeah.
It was already at that point in the past.
All right, this county board 3 or 4 years ago wouldn't even let a discussion of the sales tax come on the floor. And that was for a sales tax that would be used to pay off the jail debt, be targeted. They said it would sunset it, which they probably wouldn't have done. They said it. So you think in only 3 years, this board is going to go from not even allowing a discussion of it to you expect a close vote for operating expenses?
I'm skeptical on what they'll do. But this is what they've done with spending. In the past, when they turned down the sales tax, they could just raise property tax. And in fact, they did. These blue plot points are the percentage increase in county spending. So while they had that option of making ends meet by raising the property tax, that's what they did. But this is the budget I'm proposing, and I'm $3 million off from that target if I don't get the sales tax. I've got to plot a budget down here. So now they don't have an option of the property tax. They've got to decide if they want the county to continue operating efficiently, at least to the extent that it does now, or if they want to take the chance and roll the dice and see what happens when we cut back dramatically on all these people that are serving the community.
Right. They still do have the option of the property tax if they go to referendum. The state allows them to do that.
Well, that would give the public that option. I tell you what, though, who would spend the money to lay out the case? You know, I feel like I'm kind of out here all by myself trying to make the case for the sales tax. And it's not easy. I'm going to every group that'll listen to me.
Yeah.
And some of them groups that are pretty tough sell. But I think
you're a popular guy, aren't you?
and people say, you know, you know, how could you do that? I say, you know, how many other politicians, when they're going to do something unpopular, run to the paper to tell them first, and then run out to talk to anybody that'll listen for me to lay out the course? I've told the people earlier what I'm going to do, and there's no tricks to it. Some of my contemporaries are using another little trick. There's an out for new bonding. They're going to bond for absolutely everything.
Yeah.
And when they do that, they can continue to charge the property taxes to pay for that bonding. But first of all, that defeats the spirit of what they're telling us. They're telling us people don't want such high property taxes. But second of all, that's a dangerous trick because that pushes it off into the future. And let me make this point. This is one that the legislature's done. They've put a lid on a boiling pot, whether it's the city or the town or the county. And they've said, no new revenue, we're going to hold you down, most of them down to 1%. Because they can get 2% on their levy, but everybody gets revenues besides their levies, that, like revenue sharing, that aren't moving. So in truth, it allows them about 1% spending. That's what it is for the county, that's what it is for the city of Oshkosh, but with different circumstances. Once the legislature's put that lid on and said you can't have the revenue you need, and right now it's on there for 2 years, do you really think anyone from Madison, when that water's really churning and the demand for property tax revenue is huge, anyone's actually going to lift that lid? I think we're looking at 1% spending increases for local units of government for years and years to come. And it's going to be a slow eroding pain. But because we're one of the counties that hasn't adopted the sales tax, we've got a way to get an additional source of growing revenue. And it will let us be just a little bit more rational than those that have already adopted it.
But don't you think it's just a matter of time, though, before, I mean, look what happened with shared revenues. You know, that's our money. The state has us send it to them, and then they don't send it back to us.
Well,
and they cut it, and they cut it, and they cut it. So in reality, I mean, we can do all we can at a county level, but don't you think in reality it's just a matter of time before the state finds a, because they can't manage anything, it seems. And how long will it be before they find a way to get their hands into this pot of money, and then that's gone too, and then we're left in the same boat that we are right now?
Well, I would call on the voters to ask for an explanation of why the state that's having so much difficulty balancing their own budget, why when they decided that if they thought there's a pressing need for lower taxes, why they didn't cut any of the taxes they collect. They cut the taxes that other units of government collect. And I would argue this is the Assembly's way of like a magician causing distraction. They're trying to deal with their budget and not succeeding over here, so they want you to look over here at
and
the
trick's
financial
going on
disaster.
over here at the same time.
That's right. They want you to look at the financial disaster that they can export to local government. And you're right. Revenue sharing has been frozen for years and years. It used to be a significant portion of the city's budget and some towns' budgets. That part of it is frozen. So this little tiny part, in the city's case, the tax levy is about half of most cities' revenue. In the county's case, it's a third. That part that can move is being forced to bear all the burden. I don't think it's right. But the state makes the rules. I've got to follow them. And the sales tax is the only way I have to fight back to do what I think is rational. And think of it from the county board's perspective, if you'll let me. They added all these people one at a time because they thought we needed them, and they thought adding them was the right thing to do. If they don't adopt the sales tax, they're lopping off 100 of them that they thought were good things to have all at once.
The only thing I like about the sales tax proposal, and I don't know if this was in your consciousness when you did it, maybe it was, is that you are forcing the board to lead. In other words, if they turn this down, then the ball is in their court to identify cuts, go to referendum, whatever they want to do. They can't just sit back and say, well, Mark, come up with something else. They have to come up with something. And maybe they finally will do that. And so I'm not going to hold my breath. Can we move to Parkview?
Sure.
Okay. How does Parkview fit into all this?
Well, Parkview is currently, I think, a 211-bed facility. It's in 2 buildings, one of which is clearly failing. The building has leaks. The elevators are failing. It's an old building. It used to be the poor farm. We have about 1.2 employees for every resident. That's actually not out of line with other nursing homes. If we get into a new modern building that's laid out in the family pod type scenario, all the counties that have gone to that have been able to cut their ratio of employees to resident down closer to 1. I think Brewster Village is at like 1.04. I think Sheboygan's a little higher than that. But the whole point is by getting to a modern, slightly smaller facility, I should be able to get a lot of savings in the employment area that should cover most of the cost of the building. It's hard to know exactly because we don't know what the future holds, but it also will operate better than what we have now. And if we stay, I'm going to have to replace those elevators. And once I do that, I've got to bring that whole pavilion up to code. I don't want to put $10 or $12 million into a failing building.
But the new Parkview now, wasn't the resolution passed a couple of weeks ago? It can only be $20 million. Is that the max?
Yes, and I think that's enough. It's 18 for the building and 20 for the whole project. I think that's enough for us to do a nice and efficient building, but it's not going to have the cosmetic frills that some of the buildings have, and that's fine because we're going to be full no matter what we do. We don't have to attract business.
Well, I don't know. I don't know how many people in the public feel like I do, but the way this looked to me as a citizen was, for the bad guys in the jail, $30 million, $33 million, state of the art.
Mm-hmm.
But for the elderly, disabled, ill, we've got to pinch every single penny. Couldn't even go $23 million, had to knock it down to 20.
Mm-hmm.
Why wasn't the board as vigilant? Now, you weren't on it at the time.
No.
Why not as vigilant with the jail as with the elderly in the nursing home? I don't get it.
Well, I think the costs are a lot different. I think it is much more expensive to construct cells in the nursing home rooms. I'm not sure what the capacity of the jail is, so I don't have the ability to compare. But I think we will get a nice facility with single rooms, which, by the way, it's nicer for the patients, but it saves us a fortune because you get lots of conflicts between roommates, especially with individuals with Alzheimer's or other difficulties in cognition. So if we can go to single rooms, it's going to save us money and give them a nicer facility. I think it'll be a very nice facility, but it isn't going to be as grand or aesthetic as some of the other ones that have been constructed in recent years, and that's fine.
Okay. I personally think we're making a big mistake by downsizing the number of beds in a place like that. I don't know who makes these projections, but the way families are now, where children don't stay with their parents. I mean, we have more people now who when they're in their elderly years, are alone. Yep. And I can see much more of a need for nursing homes in future years. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, especially with baby boomers aging.
Yeah.
So,
baby boomers have been particularly bad about saving for the future.
That's right.
Most people are building up consumer credit at the same rate they're funding their 401ks, which is a path to zero net worth at retirement.
Yes.
All of this, every bit of it, what we've been talking about tonight, stems around money.
Yes.
And money is being stretched ever so tightly. You had mentioned that people should contact their legislators. You know as well as we do, Mark, people are apathetic. They're not going to be doing that. Hell, we can't even get them to go to the polls half the time. What are you folks who are elected officials, what are you doing to talk to the people in Madison? What is the message that you are giving to them as our representatives?
I think our voice in Madison is largely the Wisconsin-County Association. But in addition to that, I am talking directly to some of our legislators, especially those that are based within the county. But a group of county executives are also getting together. And what they want to push for is for the state taking back some of the cost of mandated services. I think they're right. But even if they push that point, I don't know that that gets the state to actually pay for it. There's no way for us to compel them to do so.
Mm-hmm. That was going to be my next question, and you led into it. I think this is what you're talking about. Outagamie County is actually leading the charge on this. They're leading a charge against unfunded and underfunded state mandates. They've invited officials from 5 other counties. This was a meeting that was held 2 days ago. As we tape this, but so we are one of the 5 other counties then that is working with Outagamie County.
We have a meeting in Stevens Point and another one in Milwaukee on the same subject. I don't know for sure if I'm one of the 5 that Toby talked about.
Okay.
I have a lot of contact with Toby, and he actually is riding with me in a Labor Day parade on Monday. I suspect he's going to ask me then. Okay.
So that is something that you certainly have an interest in as county executive, to start kind of putting the foot down a little bit on the hands and the heads of state government and saying, hey, stop giving us all these mandates if you're not going to help us fund them.
Initially when they give them mandates, they fund it, but then they let their funding grow at a slower rate than the related costs. Medical assistance this year, no increase in medical assistance. For the state mandated care we give to the people in the nursing home or under human services, those costs are going up. cutting that Medicaid daily reimbursement rate from $27.30 per patient per day down to $17.30. You know, imagine what the impact that has on us.
Right.
You know, the federal government and the state government generally finance the social safety net, but more and more it's just those of us in the county hanging onto those ropes, holding that together.
Absolutely.
And this levy limitation is going to cut some more of those ropes.
Okay. We're down to about 2.5 minutes.
I just want to ask you one political question, Mark. Every time someone mentions the 6th Congressional District, your name comes up as a possible candidate for that office. Have you ruled that out for 2006?
I have no intention of running against the sitting congressman. I will serve the full county executive term, and there's no exception to that.
What if he were to retire? He's probably not going to. What if it was an open seat in 2006?
No, quite honestly, I'm needed in this term. They need a number cruncher at the helm in Winnebago County for a couple of years, and so I'm going to rule that out.
Okay.
Okay. Now, go ahead if you've got something really quick,
no.
because I don't have anything really fast. You are taking this to the county board sometime this month. There's a special orders meeting or something coming up?
I'm doing a presentation on the 6th to, you know, many members of the board have not really heard the full story. And
Right.
they're each on committees that they know very well, but they don't, you know, they've not had anyone giving them the whole picture very much. That's when they first get it presented, and then they'll vote on the 19th. And I think it's probably the most significant vote that the board has had since the last budget approval.
So your special meeting with them will already be held by the time this program airs, but this program will more than likely air prior to them taking their vote. So, you know, whether you're in favor of the county sales tax or opposed to it, you know, call Mark, call your county board supervisors, call other county board supervisors. There's 38 seats, and I think only 36 are filled right now, right?
It's actually hard to get someone to take a seat. We've offered some of those seats to several people. And
There's
been
one in
turned
the
down.
college district, right?
One in the college district,
vacant.
and
Where's
one
the
in
other
the far north where Appleton and Menasha come together. It's part Appleton and part Menasha.
Okay, so if you live in those areas and you want to have a little bit of a greater voice in things, you know, call Mark or call Dave Albrecht, the county board chairman, and get your application submitted. Any real quick closing thoughts in
Well,
about
I'll just
30
offer
seconds?
that, you know, the county board special orders meeting will be on Tuesday. I would appreciate people tuning in, and I think they can make a better decision whether they're for or against this if they hear the whole story. Although much of it was discussed here, I think I can lay out in greater detail some of the impacts the 2% budget and some of the impacts the 0% budget had, and they can decide for themselves. Personally, I think it's a choice between money and community, and I'm hoping that people will come down on the side of community.
Okay. Well, and just from my own perspective, I was totally opposed to this at first. Since hearing more, learning more, reading more about it, I'm not sure where I stand. I do like the idea of getting money from tourists, though. So, anyway, thank you very much for being here and explaining things. Thanks to Tony, and thanks to all of you for letting us in your homes this evening. We'll see you next time. Until then, take good care. Keep your eye on us. We've got our eye on Oshkosh.